Nobody expects a 777 to vanish. It just doesn't happen.
Where is Malaysia Airlines Flight 370?
Debris found off the coast of Reunion Island in the Indian Ocean.
The second piece of MH370's wreckage picked up.
For years, Flight MH370 has been one of the most frustrating mysteries on the planet. The plane, carrying 239 people, suddenly vanished without any tangible explanation.
The plane turned immediately after the transponder went off. We don't know whether this was done voluntarily, whether it was done under duress. We simply have no idea.
But one passenger may have found a way to speak through a text sent after the plane disappeared. Was it real? Was it a mistake? Or did this single message blow the case wide open? In this video, we're going through the flight, the cover-ups, the rumors, and the one message that just might have solved it all. The flight that vanished. It was supposed to be a normal flight, just a regular red-eye trip from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, to Beijing, China. Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 took off a little after midnight on March 8, 2014. There were 239 people on board, all passengers from all over the world, including families, couples, business travelers, and crew members just doing their jobs. The plane was a Boeing 707, which was known to be reliable. It wasn't just any small plane, but one of the most trusted in the sky. The weather was clear that night as the crew checked in with air traffic control to confirm that everything was fine, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Then, it happened. At 1:19 a.m., the pilot said his last words to air traffic control. "Good night, Malaysian 370." And that was it. A few minutes later, MH370 disappeared from civilian radar. Just like that, it was gone. At first, no one panicked. Planes sometimes lose contact for a moment after all. Maybe there was a technical issue, or maybe the crew would check in again in a few minutes. But those minutes passed, then hours, and no one heard from the plane. When Flight MH370 didn't arrive in Beijing that morning, the alarm bells finally went off. Families waiting at the airport started to worry. The airline announced that they had lost contact with the plane, which caused panic to spread fast. Search teams were launched and news channels around the world began reporting on the missing flight. The first searches focused on the South China Sea. That's where the plane was last seen on radar. Boats and helicopters were sent out, but they found nothing. Not a single trace. No debris, signals, or even a crash site. It was like the plane had vanished into thin air. And that's when things got weird. A few days into the search, Malaysian officials revealed that military radar had picked up MH370 going west after it had disappeared from civilian radar. Instead of heading toward China, it flew back over Malaysia. Then it turned again and headed out over the Indian Ocean. Why would a passenger plane take such a strange path? Who was flying it? Was it still under control? That's when people started asking bigger questions. Was it a hijacking? Could human error or unforeseen circumstances have played a role? Could it have been a major technical failure? Over time, the disappearance of MH370 evolved into one of the most complex mysteries in aviation history. Governments, experts, and even amateur internet sleuths around the world tried to figure it out. Everyone had a theory, and everyone wanted answers. But no one really had any. The plane was gone, and there were no clear signs of where it went or why. The confusion in the first hours. When Flight MH370 vanished from radar, things didn't click right away. At first, no one seemed too alarmed. Planes sometimes lose contact for a short while. It's not common, but it happens. So in those first few moments, the people tracking the flight probably thought, "No big deal. They'll check in soon." But minutes passed. then more, and still no contact. The real problem was that nobody knew exactly when or where the plane disappeared. And worse, different people were looking at different screens, and they weren't all seeing the same thing. To make things even messier, Malaysia Airlines took hours before confirming the flight was truly missing. Families waiting at the Beijing airport were the first to feel something was wrong. The plane was supposed to land around 6:30 a.m., but that time came and went without any updates or announcements. Eventually, the airline released a short statement. They had lost contact with flight MH370, but they didn't say when it happened or what might have caused it. That silence made things worse. Some family members started crying. Others began yelling at airline staff, desperate for any information. Meanwhile, back in Malaysia, government officials and search teams were scrambling to figure out where to look. Based on the last known location, they started searching the South China Sea, which made sense at the time. Dozens of ships and planes from different countries joined the mission. It was one of the biggest search efforts in aviation history. But there was just one problem. They were looking in the wrong place. A few days in, Malaysia's military revealed something that changed everything. Their radar had tracked an unidentified aircraft turning back across the Malaysian peninsula, then heading out over the Andaman Sea. That unknown aircraft was most likely MH370, but this wasn't reported right away. For a while, officials didn't share this info with the public or even with other search teams. So while people were scouring the South China Sea, the plane may have already been far away, flying in a completely different direction. This delay caused even more confusion. Different officials gave different answers. One said the plane was last seen heading northeast. Another said southwest. Families were angry, and reporters were confused. No one knew what to believe. And the more people spoke, the more it felt like a cover-up. In reality, it was probably just poor communication. But in a case this mysterious, even small mistakes stood out. The first hours after MH370 went missing were full of missed chances, miscommunication, and mistakes. And those hours may have just been the most important. If the radar data had been shared earlier, or if the search had started in the right place, maybe the story would be different today. But it wasn't. Those early hours were lost, and with them, maybe the best chance of finding the plane. Turning off the transponder. Interestingly, right after flight MH370 left Malaysian airspace and was about to enter Vietnamese airspace, the transponder was turned off. So what's a transponder anyway? It's basically a little device on the plane that talks to air traffic control. It sends out important information like the plane's ID, altitude, and speed, and it helps radar systems follow the plane more easily. In other words, it's what keeps the plane visible on civilian radar screens. And when that transponder went dark, MH370 disappeared from civilian radar. It's like someone turned off the lights in a room and walked out without saying goodbye. But here's the thing. You can't just accidentally switch off a transponder. It's not something you bump into or press by mistake. It takes a few deliberate steps inside the cockpit. That's why it raised red flags right away. Pilots are trained to use the transponder, and switching it off is not part of any normal procedure. Investigators believe the transponder was shut off just minutes after the final voice transmission. The timing felt important, like whoever did it knew what they were doing and exactly when to do it. Some people thought it might be a technical failure. Planes are full of electronics, and stuff can break. But experts said the chance of a transponder failing on its own right when the plane was changing airspace zones was super rare. And here's another weird detail. Even after the transponder was turned off, military radar still picked up the plane, which means it didn't vanish completely. It kept flying, but only people with access to military equipment could see it now. And this kind of raised a scary question. Was someone trying to hide the plane on purpose? If the goal was to make the plane disappear from radar, shutting off the transponder was the first step. That's why many people, including experts, started thinking this wasn't just a tragic accident. Some even began to consider scenarios involving deliberate actions. But who did it and why? Was it the pilot, a hijacker, or someone else in the cockpit? Captain Zahari Shah. When flight MH370 disappeared, one name quickly became the focus of attention: Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah. He was the man in charge of the plane that night, a seasoned pilot with over 18,000 hours of flying experience. He was a 53 years old who was well-respected, friendly, and loved by many, and had been with Malaysia Airlines since 1981. A lot of people who worked with him described him as calm, confident, and very skilled in the cockpit. Outside of flying, Zahari lived in a quiet neighborhood in Shah Alam, Malaysia. He was married with 3 grown children. He also had a YouTube channel where he posted tech tutorials and DIY home appliance repair videos. He enjoyed cooking, flying drones, and sharing life hacks. To many people, he seemed like a regular, down-to-earth guy. But after MH370 went missing, investigators thoroughly reviewed various aspects of his personal and professional life. People wanted answers, and Zahari was the last person known to be flying the plane. And so, investigators had to ask the hard questions. Was he responsible? Could he have done something on purpose? One thing that stood out during the investigation was that Zahari had a personal flight simulator at home, which is not unusual for pilots because many love to practice flying in their free time. But when authorities checked the simulator's data, they found something strange. Among the saved flight paths was a route that ended in the southern Indian Ocean, close to where MH370 is believed to have disappeared. That made investigators raise their eyebrows. Was this just a coincidence? Or had he been practicing something? Still, this didn't prove anything. The flight simulator data was several months old, and just because a pilot simulates flying somewhere doesn't mean he plans to do it in real life. In fact, pilots often try difficult or odd flight paths just for fun or for practice. The Malaysian police looked into his mental health, his finances, his marriage, and his social media activity. They found no signs of radical behavior, no big debts, and no evidence of terrorism. But there were subtle hints that maybe Zahari wasn't doing well emotionally. Some reports suggested his marriage was strained. He may have been living alone in the days leading up to the flight. A few friends said he seemed withdrawn, while others said he was fine. It was hard to get a clear picture, and because there was no black box and no real evidence from the cockpit, everything was based on speculation. No personal message or documentation was ever found that could shed light on his intentions, just speculations. One popular theory is that Zahari may have deliberately taken the plane off course and flown it deep into the ocean in a controlled dive. If true, this would explain the calm path of the ghost flight and the sudden silence after the transponder was turned off. But again, there is no solid proof, and that's what makes this case so frustrating. Investigations and theories. Once it was clear that flight MH370 wasn't coming back, the real investigation began. But from the very start, it was a mess. Different countries were involved, everyone had a different opinion, and no one had a clear answer. Malaysia led the official investigation, but they weren't alone. Australia, China, the US, and several other countries all joined in. Experts looked at radar data, satellite signals, and airplane systems. Search teams covered thousands of miles of ocean. But still, there were no solid answers. So naturally, people started coming up with theories. Some were based on facts, and others? Not so much. The first was that the pilot did it, and it was one of the most talked about theories. Some investigators believe Captain Zahari Shah planned the whole thing. They think he waited until the plane crossed into a radar gap, turned it around, disabled communication systems, and flew it into the deep Indian Ocean. But why would he do that? Some say he was deeply unhappy, possibly depressed. Maybe it was some sort of a kamikaze mission, or he wanted to make a statement, or maybe he just snapped. But this theory is fraught with lots of loopholes. First of all, Zahari did not leave any notes, so there's no solid proof of a motive. And friends and family say he loved his job and wasn't the type to harm others. Still, with the flight simulator data showing a similar route and the plane's odd behavior, the pilot theory remains at the top of many experts' lists. Another popular speculation is that the plane was possibly hijacked, maybe a passenger or even someone from the flight crew. In this theory, the hijacker turns off the transponder, redirects the plane, and tries to fly it somewhere else. Again, this theory has some holes, and that is the fact that no one claimed responsibility. There were no demands, threats, or ransom calls. In almost every known hijacking, someone eventually speaks up. But that didn't happen here. Plus, every passenger was checked, and no one stood out as suspicious. Still, some believe this could have been an inside job, with someone secretly trained to fly taking control. Some experts theorized that the plane may have suffered a technical malfunction, electrical issue, or sudden loss of cabin pressure. Maybe the crew turned back, but were incapacitated due to cabin conditions, which explain the turn and the silence. The theory is that the plane kept flying on autopilot until it ran out of fuel and ended in the ocean. It's possible, but critics say this doesn't explain why systems were turned off or why the plane followed such a strange path. But then the next theory is where things get a little bit more suspicious. Some people think MH370 may have gotten too close to sensitive military airspace, maybe in Malaysia, Thailand, or even the US base on Diego Garcia. Could it have been mistakenly intercepted or involved in a military incident? Governments deny this, of course, but delays in sharing radar data and confusion during the early hours only added fuel to the fire. Some believe countries know more than they're saying, and maybe that's true. But so far, no real evidence supports this, but the idea lives on, especially online. The alleged text message. One of the strangest and most talked about claims surrounding the disappearance of flight MH370 is the story of a mysterious text message that first appeared online not long after the plane vanished. A rumor started to spread that a passenger aboard the missing flight had somehow managed to send a chilling text message. A message that, according to some, could solve the case. Naturally, the internet lit up. People claimed that the message was sent by a passenger named Philip Wood, an American IBM employee who was on board flight MH370. The story goes like this. Philip somehow managed to hide his phone during the alleged hijacking or crash, then later used it to send a brief, cryptic message. The alleged message simply said, "I have been held hostage by unknown military personnel after my flight was hijacked." The message also supposedly included GPS coordinates, placing him on or near the Diego Garcia military base, which was a secretive US base in the middle of the Indian Ocean. Some versions of the rumor even claimed he took a photo in total darkness and embedded the GPS location in the image data. That's a dramatic story, and if true, it would change everything we thought we knew about the disappearance. But the problem is that there's no real proof that the message was ever sent. So, where did this story come from? It first appeared on conspiracy websites and forums, not from investigators or family members. The photo tied to the story was a completely dark image. People pointed to metadata inside the image, saying it included GPS coordinates for Diego Garcia, but tech experts quickly debunked that. They said the metadata could easily be faked or altered. Also, the phone networks over the Indian Ocean don't work the way they do on land. If Philip had been on Diego Garcia, his phone would have needed to connect to a satellite or use local cell towers, both of which are tightly controlled and monitored on military bases. There's no confirmed record of any signal or call from his number. The U.S. military also strongly denied any connection to MH370 or the claim that it had landed or been taken to Diego Garcia. And no family members of Philip Wood ever confirmed that he sent such a message. In fact, they never mentioned it publicly at all. So why did this story gain so much attention? The simple answer is that people were desperate for answers. The disappearance of MH370 was confusing, frustrating, and scary. The idea that someone on board had reached out, even for just a second, offered a small glimmer of hope. It gave people something to hold on to. But that's also why false leads can be dangerous. This rumor distracted people from the real investigation. It sent internet detectives down rabbit holes and added more noise to an already confusing mystery. And worst of all, it gave families false hope, making the grieving process even harder. Still, many people continue to believe the story is true. They say the military or the government covered it up. They believe Philip Wood was alive and tried to reach out, while others think the message might have been real, but was deleted or hidden. But again, there is no solid evidence, just a bunch of speculation. Even major investigators and aviation experts have said the story doesn't add up. The timing, the location, and the technology all make it highly unlikely. Could a message have been sent? After hearing about the text message from Philip Wood, a lot of people have asked if someone on board could truly have sent a message, which is a rather fair question. The thing is, in the world we currently live in, we're used to staying connected, even at 30,000 feet. But the truth is, sending a message from a plane over the ocean isn't that simple, especially in 2014. At the time, most commercial flights did not have Wi-Fi, especially on airlines like Malaysia Airlines. So unless someone had access to special equipment or satellite service, the only way to send a message would have been through a regular cell signal. And there's the problem. Most of the world's oceans don't have cell towers. Planes flying over land often stay connected through ground-based towers. But once they get out over water, they usually lose signal completely. That's why phones often say no service during long international flights. Flight MH370 was flying over the South China Sea when it first went silent. Later, based on satellite data, it likely crossed over the Strait of Malacca, then headed into the vast Indian Ocean, which is far from land and far from any kind of cell coverage. So, even if a passenger had a phone in their pocket or bag, it probably wouldn't have been able to connect to anything once the plane was far from land. But we could also consider satellite phones. Some planes do have satellite phones in the cockpit or business class. These can make calls even in remote areas, but they aren't easy to use, and passengers can't just pull one out of their seat back pocket and start texting. If someone had a personal satellite phone, which is rare, they might have been able to send a message, but again, we have no proof anyone on MH370 had one. Also, satellite phones are not invisible. Calls and messages through satellite networks are logged and traceable. So far, no satellite provider has reported any calls or messages from the flight. Then another thing to think about is whether someone would have even had the chance to text. If the plane lost pressure quickly or experienced an emergency, passengers might have been incapacitated within minutes. If the pilot deliberately cut communication and changed course, it's likely he took steps to stop anyone from alerting the outside world. Also, if something happened while the passengers were asleep, which is very possible, since the flight took off at 12:41 a.m., they may not have even known anything was wrong. So could a message really have been sent? Technically, it's possible, but very, very unlikely. There would have needed to be a working phone, a strong enough signal, time to type and send the message, and a network to receive it. That's a lot to ask during what was likely a fast and confusing series of events. So while the idea of a message from a passenger is interesting and makes for a good headline, the chances of it actually happening are close to zero. Wreckage and debris. For more than a year after flight MH370 vanished, no piece of the plane had been found. Families were desperate for proof, and search teams worked tirelessly, scoured thousands of miles of ocean, but came up empty. It almost felt like the plane had vanished into thin air, which caused people to speculate wildly. Then, in July 2015, everything changed. A piece of debris washed up on a beach on Réunion Island, which is a small French territory in the Indian Ocean. It was about 2,300 miles away from the plane's last known location. The part was a flaperon, a wing section used to help control the aircraft during flight. It was battered and covered in barnacles, which suggested it had spent many months drifting at sea, but clearly part of a Boeing 777, the same model as MH370. Experts quickly confirmed it did come from MH370. For the first time, there was real, physical proof that the plane had crashed somewhere in the ocean. After that, more debris started showing up. Pieces were found in Mozambique, Madagascar, South Africa, Mauritius, and other places along the western Indian Ocean. Some were large, like parts of the engine cowling. Others were tiny, like the interior panels, seat cushions, and even window frames. Each new piece gave a tiny glimpse into the crash. But none of them answered the biggest question. Why did the plane go down? Most of the debris was too damaged or too small to give clear answers. Some pieces showed signs of erosion, likely from months or even years drifting in the ocean. Others had marine life growing on them, but nothing told investigators exactly where the crash happened. And without a clear impact site, investigators were left relying on guesswork and probability models. The Indian Ocean is massive, and the underwater terrain is rough. Even with satellite data and drift pattern studies, narrowing down the crash zone has been extremely hard. The ocean's currents can carry wreckage for thousands of miles in unpredictable directions. One piece could drift north, while another goes west for months before reaching land. In total, over 30 pieces of suspected MH370 debris have been found, but only a few have been officially confirmed. For families, each piece brought a mix of pain and hope. On one hand, the debris was proof that their loved ones were gone. On the other, it kept the case alive and gave them something real to hold on to. But still, the main wreckage, including the black boxes, has never been found. And that's the most frustrating part. Without the black boxes, investigators can't hear what was said in the cockpit or what went wrong in the final moments. The debris confirms the crash, but it doesn't solve the mystery. It only proves what many had feared all along. Flight MH370 ended in the ocean. But how and why remain unanswered. The deep ocean. Finding a few pieces of the plane confirmed what many had feared, but it also raised an even tougher question. If parts of MH370 are washing up on distant beaches, Where's the rest of it? The answer probably lies somewhere deep beneath the Indian Ocean. And that's a bigger problem than most people realize. The part of the ocean believed to hold the wreckage is one of the most remote and hostile places on Earth. It's not just far from land, it's incredibly deep, with some areas dropped down over 20,000 feet. That's more than 3 miles underwater. At that depth, there's no sunlight. The temperature is near freezing, and the pressure is so intense it can crush steel. Even with all our technology, we've only mapped a small portion of the seafloor in that region. The ocean floor isn't smooth either. It's full of steep ridges, narrow valleys, and underwater cliffs, which makes scanning the area feel like trying to search a mountain range in total darkness. Search teams used advanced sonar and underwater vehicles, but progress was painfully slow. Some equipment failed, and even when scans picked up unusual shapes, they often turned out to be rocks. Months would pass with no meaningful discoveries, and each day cost money, time, and hope. Then there's the issue of ocean currents. Even if you had a rough idea of where the plane went down, the currents could have pushed the wreckage miles away or scattered pieces across different depths. Some parts may be buried in soft sediment, while others could be stuck in narrow cracks between rocky formations. The reality is, the ocean has had years to hide this wreckage, and the longer something stays underwater, the harder it becomes to recover. Corrosion gradually deteriorates metal structures, marine life grows over everything, and smaller pieces can drift off or sink deeper out of reach. This is why, despite all the effort, the plane's main body and black boxes still haven't been found, because the ocean doesn't give up its secrets easily. So while bits of MH370 have reached dry land, the truth behind what happened may still be lying at the bottom of one of the world's most unreachable places. But we must ask ourselves, what if the message was real, and we just chose to ignore the truth it claimed? Could someone have survived long enough to send it? Or are we chasing shadows while the real truth is being hidden in plain sight? Leave your answers in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoy this video, please click on the next one on your screen.